Good morning, thank you for joining me. I hope everybody's well. Today's video is an old video that I filmed back in 2017. Gosh, that seems a long time ago. It's a story time video, and it's about my childhood friend Linda. And the reason I thought about this video recently, or remembered this video, was that I referred to it in a Q&A. I was answering some of the questions that you'd asked me in a series of Q&A videos, which I think you'll have seen by the time you see this. And I recalled this video as part of the answer to one of the questions, and when I looked back to see if I could see the video on my channel, I realised it had been private for a long time. A couple of years ago I made a lot of my older videos private for various reasons, and I realised that it had been private, so nobody had been able to access it for a while. And I watched it back and I thought it was worth another outing, to be honest. So I thought I'd download it and re-upload it with a bit of a new intro. It's a standalone video that speaks for itself, to be honest. I tell the story in it. So without further ado, I'll just let the video run, and I hope you enjoy this story time about my lovely friend Linda. Hi guys, thanks for joining me. I'm hoping to do this video in one take. I've been putting off making it, I'll be perfectly honest, ever since I started my Storytime videos earlier on this year. I knew that this was a story that I wanted to tell at some point, and today seems to be a fitting day to tell you that story, because as you watch this on Friday, I'm driving up to Bournemouth to go to a funeral of a friend, a very dear friend. So they say that your memory is, we don't remember days, we remember moments, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that is so true, particularly of this story that I'm going to tell you today for me, because even though a lot of the memories that I'm going to talk about are 40 plus years old, they're still absolutely as crystal clear, like a little snapshot inside my head, and I can see them as though they happened yesterday. So I guess this story starts with my very first days at primary school, and at primary school we had what would these days be termed a classroom assistant, I guess. I think she was probably just known as a helper then. I don't think they had such grand terms as classroom assistants or teaching assistants or whatever they are, who I remember very, very clearly from my earliest days at primary school as a very friendly and lovely and safe person to be around. I was very, very young, obviously very, very young. I was at primary school, I was 5, 6. I wasn't an easy child. I didn't make friends easily. I was very clingy with my parents, and I struggled socially a lot through primary school. Perhaps that's a story for another time. I turned out all right in the end, but yeah, there was this classroom assistant, Mrs. Sparks, and she was lovely, absolutely lovely. She was also a dinner lady, and so at lunchtime she would be there out in the playground, and I didn't really like spending an awful lot of time with other children. And I remember very clearly her holding her hand and walking around the playground with her at lunchtime, and she was lovely and she made me feel safe, and she was just a presence in my life at primary school that I remember very clearly, and as being, you know, just happy, solid memories of her. And as time went on, I made friends, obviously, and one of my very first friends at primary school happened to be her daughter, Linda. Linda and I became really close friends really quickly. We spent loads of time together out of school and in school. Almost like sisters. I don't have a sister, but she was my best friend. She was my best friend all the way through primary school. And even when I changed schools, at middle school level, I went to a different school from her, and we were still very close friends. We went horse riding together, we went to guides together, and initially brownies, then girl guides later on. We did everything together. We used to play board games when it rained. We used to go, because in those days we used to go out on our bikes. In those days you could just go, and we went out for the day, went cycling around the forest. We used to make dens and take sandwiches and be out all day, and not so much now, of course. This is when we were a bit older, probably like 10 or 11 maybe, but yeah, we used to spend all our time together, and we were best friends. We argued, as best friends do, and made up just as quickly. We had our disagreements and we fell out, but you just, that's what a best friend is all about, isn't it? And Linda was my best friend, and I remember particularly one of my snapshot memories of Linda's is I used to go and stay at her house quite often for a sleepover. We didn't call them sleepovers in those days, it wasn't a thing then, but I used to go and spend the night with her. And one New Year's Eve my parents had gone out, so I'd gone to spend the night at Linda's. I don't know how old we were, maybe 8 or 9, I guess, and we had these little indoor fireworks which probably wouldn't be allowed now, excuse me, but we had this set of fireworks. They were just little tiny things. I can't even remember exactly what they did, but we were sitting with her parents in the lounge, and her mum had done us some special tea as it was New Year's Eve, and I think we were allowed to stay up till midnight, and we were going to have these fireworks. And I remember one of them, they just had a new carpet fairly recently, and I remember one of these fireworks, they're really tiny piddly little things that you could were on the floor, burning this ruddy great hole in their carpet, and that hole was there for years and years and years afterwards, well into my 30s, until they got a new carpet. I don't know why I told that story really, but that's just, I guess, funny moments that you remember. When we were 15, towards the end of one winter, about springtime I think it was, Linda had a really bad cough, and she just couldn't get shot of this cough, and her mum took her to the doctors. And I'm not going to dwell on the ins and outs because I don't think I could tell the story without getting upset, but 4 months later Linda had died of lung cancer which metastasized to her brain. It was very quick, it was awful, it was unthinkable. She was 16 years old. Yeah, as I said before, the snapshots of what you remember in your life. You don't remember days, you remember moments. And yeah, the moments around that time that are snapshots inside my head are absolutely crystal clear. What I do want to talk about a little bit is the day that Linda died, and we'd known since the night before. She'd gone into a coma the night before, and her mum had phoned and said she'd gone into a coma and spoken to my mum about it, and so we knew that the end was coming. It had been very quick. We didn't know until really a few days before she died that it was so as bad as it was. They didn't have children's cancer wards and stuff like that then. Looking back, she was 16, it was 33 years ago now. Times were very different. It just was different. There wasn't but you didn't really hear about children getting cancer. It wasn't, I mean, I'm sure it happened, but it certainly wasn't something that is known and talked about and everything now. Linda did have some radiotherapy and eventually surgery to remove one lung, but it was too late. The cancer had got to her brain and there wasn't anything else they could do by then. Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about the day before, or the day she died, and we'd had this phone call the night before from her mum telling us that she got into a coma and it was just a matter of time, and I was just devastated. I had a German exchange student over at the time. I don't even know why I'm mentioning that, just because that's something that I particularly remember from the time. And my parents had gone out that afternoon, and I was at home with this German exchange student, and Linda's mum phoned up, and she wanted to talk to my mum and asked if she could speak to her. I guess she didn't want to tell me. And I said Mum was out, and I said to her, how's Linda, and she told me that Linda had died. Oh, I was hoping to get through this without this. And she said to me, bear in mind her 16-year-old daughter has just died. She's just got back from the hospital having watched her daughter die. She said to me, are you all right, Caroline? Do you want me to come round and sit with you? And I just thought that was the nicest thing. You know, the most selfless, and didn't get a tissue, typical. And I'll never forget that. That was so nice. Anyway, my parents came back from wherever they'd been, and I said to my mum I wanted to go round there and see Doris and Fred, Linda's parents. And we went round, and I remember they were so brave, and we sat with them, and Fred made a cup of tea. My mum doesn't doesn't have sugar in her tea, and Fred asked her if she took sugar, and she said no, and he absolutely filled it with sugar. He just obviously didn't know what was going on. Again, I don't know why I'm telling you that. It's just something I remember from that day. Just weird stuff that you remember. And I went and sat in Linda's bedroom for a little while. I asked if I could go and sit in her bedroom, and I went and sat up there. And she had this China horse that we were both absolutely horse mad in those days. And her mum came up to the bedroom and asked me if I'd like it. And she gave it to me. I'm not trying to be maudlin. I'm making this video because I want to... It's kind of for my own memories, so I don't ever lose those memories. It's always there, you know. But again, as I said, something I wanted to share. Let's try and get over this bit and move on. The funeral was awful. Honestly, I don't have a lot of memories of that. I've got one snapshot memory in my mind of all my teachers from primary school being there. Nobody was allowed to wear black, and it was a beautiful summer's day, absolutely beautiful, but obviously just a devastating day. But I remember Doris and Fred, Linda's parents, and her brother Phil, all being so bloody brave, so brave, far braver than I was, so dignified. And moving on through the years, I stayed in touch with Doris and Fred. I know they found it difficult because people didn't know how to... People would avoid them in the street because they didn't know what to say. Doris was a very well-known figure in the sort of local village because she worked at the school. She still worked at the school at this point and did for years afterwards. And yeah, she was a really well-known figure, but people would cross the street to avoid talking to her because they didn't know what to say. And I think they really liked spending time with me, as I did with them, because we would talk about Linda and we would talk about our memories of her, and I found that very easy to do. And Lynn would always naturally come up in conversation right till, you know, the very last times I saw them. Lynn was always in our conversation. Our conversation was peppered with mentions of her. Their house was full of photos of her. I know her older brother Phil found it more difficult to talk about her. I never really talked about Lynn with Phil again after that, after she died. But I kept in touch with him as well. And yeah, so we kept up this friendship, myself and Doris and Fred. And through the years, I still went to see them all the time. When I was staying with my parents, they still live in the same house now. I still remember Linda's phone number off by heart from when we were kids. I don't think that will ever go out of my head. And it's 33 years since she died. I mean, yeah, it's a number I'll never ring again now. as time went on, obviously I got married, I had William, and it was lovely for me that Ashley and Will both got on not well with Doris and Fred. We went to see them all together sometimes, not often, but occasionally. It was more often just me going to see them. But when Will was little, Lynn's father Fred was a very quirky, unusual man. Fred was great with kids. William had a really lovely relationship with him. And instead of just telling you about this, what I want to do is, Fred died 6 years ago, and Doris asked me if I would write a eulogy for his funeral. I was very honoured to have been asked that. And I wanted to read out what I wrote about him, just really to keep it on record. What I wrote for his funeral. I'll try and get through it without. Fred was one of my favourite people in the world. There were many things I liked and admired about him, but I think my favourite was that he was never afraid to say exactly what he thought. And I'm sure that everybody here today will remember that Fred didn't suffer fools gladly, so quite often his outspoken opinions would cause a ripple of amusement or shock amongst his audience, and no doubt some embarrassment for Doris. I first encountered Fred some 40 years ago when I was 5, as he was my best friend Linda's dad. I remember him making us shriek with laughter with silly rhymes and telling us all types of tall stories that I was quite convinced at the time were true. Fred is also one of the most knowledgeable people. His thirst for knowledge and interest in the world around him never waned. Even on the last occasion I saw him a couple of months ago, he had a pile of books on the go. It would be wrong to write this without mentioning the adversity that Fred faced during his life. As well as battling his ill health for many years, Fred and Doris suffered the loss of their daughter Lynn at only 16. The strength, courage and fortitude that they both showed on coping with this terrible event stands out as quite simply the bravest thing I have ever witnessed. I kept in touch with Fred and Doris after Lynn's death, and at some point they both became not just my friends' parents, but my friends. As time went by, I got married and had a son, and they both got on famously with Fred. Ashley, my husband, shared a love of astronomy with Fred, and whenever I took William, my son, with me to see them, Fred always found something to keep Will fascinated, often fossils, I recall. One clear night recently, on holiday in Cyprus, Ashley and Will were lying looking up at the stars. I was reading and only had half an ear on their conversation. They were discussing whether or not a particular star was a planet and couldn't make up their minds. A brief silence ensued, and then Will said, "Fred would know." "Yes," agreed Ashley, "he would." The next day we heard that Fred had died. I'd like to think that he is up there amongst the stars and planets that he loved, and with his Lynn again at last. I'm not sure what Fred's beliefs were about the afterlife, though I'm sure we can safely assume that they were unconventional. But wherever you are now, Fred, know that you will be greatly missed and always remembered with a smile. 6 years on, and sadly today I'm on my way to Doris's funeral. Doris died quite suddenly after a brief illness, and the news of her death really quite knocked me for 6. I'm not going to lie about it. You would think that, I don't know, it's something about the thought of now they're all gone. I guess I still have that fear that Linda pops into my head even now, 33 years after her death, on every couple of weeks. For some reason her name will just pop into my head, and now I kind of think there'll be no one left who remembers her. My mum used to take a bunch of flowers round to Doris every year on Linda's birthday since she died. For those whole 33 years she's never missed a year, and now she won't be able to do that anymore. I just feel so sad about it all, although I guess a lot of people would believe that now they're all reunited together. But I'm not going to talk about Lynn's brother. He's still alive because he may not want me to talk about him on YouTube, so I'm going to absolutely respect his privacy in that, and hope he doesn't mind me sharing my memories of his family in this way if he ever happens to come across this, which I don't imagine he will. I didn't expect it to be that hard to tell, but I'm glad I've told it. I hope it comes across okay when I watch it back and isn't a disaster, because I don't want to make it again. Suffice to say that my memories of Linda are just so happy, and I'm so glad that I kept my relationship with her parents going. I don't quite know how to finish this video off. I guess that the final thing to say is, wherever they are now, I'd just like to thank all three of them, Doris, Fred and Linda, for all the happy memories that I shared with all of them. And I'm very grateful for the lessons that I learned in my life that I can carry with me through my whole life, from Doris and Fred, about showing courage and strength in the face of the most awful things happening to you, and just getting on with things. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you for watching.